and we are good to go.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I have the great pleasure of introducing Dr. David Wiley, who's going to give us an excellent talk today and helping us understand the other components that are associated with success in OER. David is really a pioneer in the field, one of the first to really champion the idea of transitioning teaching from a solo sport into a community-based research project that really focuses on how do we use data and work together as a community to help improve student outcomes. My name is Tori Matthews. I happen to be a former faculty member in SUNY, and I have the great pleasure now of working with SUNY through Lumen Learning as a manager for the SUNY Lumen Learning OER partnership. So OER is the online learning initiative out of Carnegie Mellon. OER along with Lumen have been working with SUNY now for about 5 or 6 years to offer a slate of different opportunities for faculty members who are interested in moving into OER. My main job is to help increase awareness about the partnership across SUNY to make sure that faculty and administrators are able to review the resources that are available through the partnership. I'll talk a little bit about those on the next slide. And to help, build a conversation around using evidence-based courseware, technology, professional development opportunities that support faculty first, and then ultimately lead to success for students. Can I get the next slide, David? So there are two main areas that the partnership functions in. There is the SUNY OER Ready to Adopt catalog that many of you heard about during the opening remarks. So again, there are over 120 courses offered through Lumen Learning and OLI that cover a host of different areas of study. So humanities, languages, mathematics, natural science, business, social science, technology. OER.suny.edu is the URL. You can go there, take a look. There's an ability, if you click on a class and you're interested in it, you can make a request and we'll get a cartridge out to you so you can review it. There's also professional development opportunities. Again, those that are developing through OLI and through Lumen Circles, there are a host of virtual PD that's available either as an individual through SUNY if you want to sign up as SUNY faculty, or we can do large-scale circles. They cover course design for student success, belonging, inclusive teaching fundamentals, active learning, online teaching foundations. So all these are available at no cost to SUNY faculty and students. If you want to know more about it, the easiest way is to contact me. So that's my email address there at the bottom, tori@lumenlearning.com. You can send me an email and I'll make sure that I connect you with the resources. That's my introduction. I know David has a lot to talk about today, so I want to give him his time. I introduce to you Dr. David Wiley, who's going to give us a very exciting talk. I'm looking forward to hearing it myself. So David, it's all you.
Thank you, Tori. Thanks very much. All right, let me say just a few words about Lumen Learning very quickly if you're not familiar with us. Our mission is to enable unprecedented learning for all students, and we operationalize that mission by thinking about it as eliminating race, gender, and income as predictors of student success, because unfortunately today those things are predictors of student success. And so we're working really toward equitable outcomes for everyone. We're about 13 years old. There are 75 of us in 26 states. And last year we supported about 350,000 students and 3,000 faculty members across the United States in these areas that Tori's been talking about. And then I'm going to talk about some more as we get into the presentation here today. So, excuse me. I titled this talk, The Secrets to Improving Student Success by Adopting OER. And I want to redirect for a minute as we open up. So I want to talk about two secrets here. The first secret being that you really have to understand that you can't reliably improve student success simply by adopting OER. And maybe you're surprised to hear me say that, but let me dive into that just a little bit. First, think about why would adopting OER improve student success? One hypothesis might be because it's free and that improves access and affordability. Now, OpenStax, who, if you're in the OER space, you've likely heard of, director of research and their founder, Rich Baranek, and some others published a paper a couple of years ago where they demonstrated that improving access will almost never measurably improve student outcomes. And so the paper, of course, is open access. It's called Implications of the Access Hypothesis. That's the keyword that you would search for if you wanted to go read this paper for yourself. But just to give you a quick idea of what they're talking about here, this quote, current research approach in OER is the equivalent of measuring the effect of a pain-relieving drug on a sample of people who are mostly not in pain. And what they mean by that is that the overwhelming majority of students find some way to access their course materials. They either purchase course materials, or they access them through the library, or they share with a friend. But at the end of the day, the overwhelming majority of students end up with some kind of access to their course materials. And so if we think that just increasing access to students is going to improve outcomes in a measurable way, there really aren't that many students who just have no access at all. And so to use their language here, it's like measuring the effect of a pain-relieving drug on a sample of people who mostly aren't in pain. Most of our students end up accessing this material in some way. And so there's just not a lot of headroom in terms of research results to go and find from improving access in the way that we normally think about it, or what they call here the access hypothesis, the idea that increasing access is going to measurably improve student outcomes. They also say here that through the use of simulation analysis, we demonstrate that even if there is a learning benefit of OER, standard research methods are unlikely to detect it. So one hypothesis we might have about why adopting OER would improve student outcomes is around increasing access and affordability, but the researchers from OpenStax kind of demonstrated pretty persuasively that that's not going to be the case. The second hypothesis is, well, maybe they're going to improve outcomes because they're openly licensed. Well, open licenses make it possible for faculty to teach in different ways and students to learn in different ways, but the kind of course redesign that's necessary to really leverage the power of open licenses takes a lot of work and effort, and honestly, very few of us have time to engage in that kind of activity. I'm a co-author on a meta-analysis that's just been accepted. This is in press right now, looking at all of the research on the impacts of OER on student outcomes that meet kind of a minimum threshold for quality. And what we found there is that OER really has no practical impact on student outcomes. There are some studies that show positive impacts. There are some studies that show negative impacts of OER adoption, but the vast majority of studies show no impact on student outcomes at all. And for several years, so just let me kind of restate this first secret here, that adopting OER does reliably save students money. Students will save money every single time you adopt OER. That will reliably, consistently happen. But adopting OER does not reliably, consistently improve student success. And for many years, OER advocates have summarized this message of you're going to save money and you're going to get basically the same outcomes that you had before. They've summarized that message of saying with OER, you get the same results for less. And I mean, everybody likes getting the same results for less. If you can get the same gallon of milk for less or the same gallon of gas for less, that's amazing, right? We all love getting the same results for less. But when we think about this in the education context, and we think about what are the results that we're currently getting, the results just aren't great. The Department of Ed tracks graduation among other metrics, but they track this graduation metric within 150% time. So this graph is showing us students graduating from 4-year programs within 6 years of starting. And you can see that these rates aren't great for any group, but there are some huge disparities here across race and ethnic groups. And the story is even worse if you look at graduation within 150% time from 2-year institutions. So this is the percentage of students that graduate from their 2-year program within 3 years. So that's 150%. And these results just aren't great. So saying, well, we get the same results for less, that's great as far as saving money is concerned, and that's something we should absolutely care about, and we should be working towards saving students money. But this can't be kind of where we hang up the banner and say, we save students money, so we're done. There's really a lot of work we ought to be doing in terms of trying to improve student success. So adopting OER does reliably save students money, but adopting OER does not reliably improve student success. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, you literally just said that some research studies do show students doing better when their faculty adopt OER. So what are you saying? What's really happening in those studies where a positive effect is found? And I would suggest to you that the answer to that question is confounds. So let me explain what I mean about that for a minute. Go find your favorite OER research study that found a positive impact on student success and ask these 4 questions of that. Take a look at the study and look at them kind of through this critical lens. Did the study control for differences in instructors, in students, in instructor supports, and in the instructional design of the materials? And I will say that some of my own early studies are in this category of studies that showed a positive impact that you will be benefited from looking at with this critical lens. And let's just talk about each of these very quickly. In terms of instructor effects, or why would you need to control for differences in instructors? Some instructors, I don't mean to offend anybody by saying this, but some instructors are better teachers than others. And specifically when I say that, I mean they employ more evidence-based teaching practices than other instructors do. It's also true that some instructors are easier graders than others. And I don't mean that they are dishonest in the way that they mark assignments, but it's not uncommon to see a class where you'll have a really large proportion of the final grade related to some non-learning outcome, right? Your grade is supposed to be a measure of what you've learned, but in a class where 15% of the grade is attendance, then that's the difference between a C and an A, and I don't have to learn anything extra, right? It's a non-learning factor. And it's much easier to get a higher grade in a class like that than it is in a class where the grade is comprised almost entirely of high-stakes assessments, for example. So some instructors are better teachers, some are easier graders, and the effect of the instructor on student outcomes is significantly larger than prior GPA, than race, age, gender, than the course materials they select, etc. So if you read a study and instructors haven't been randomly assigned to either use OER or use something that's not OER, or some kind of matching like a propensity score matching hasn't been done, then even though that study says it's asking a question about OER, the question that study is probably really asking is, how do outcomes differ when students take courses from the kind of instructors who adopt OER compared to when they take courses from the kinds of instructors who wouldn't? That's a related question to what difference does OER make in student outcomes, but it's a very different question. It's a question about instructors and kinds of instructors. Now, if we randomly assign some instructors to use OER and some to use TCM, traditionally copyrighted materials, then we could really get at a question about OER. You might also include some kind of teacher effect variable that you can construct. I've seen some studies that have done that and have done a nice job there. But that's the biggest influence of all. The instructor is a bigger influence on students than anything else. And so we need to control for those. Student effects as well. Some students are better academically prepared than others. Some student situations outside of school are more conducive to learning than others. And some students, for whatever reason, with what's going on in their life, are more just on top of things, like registering for classes, than others. So when you have a certain number of sections that are no cost or low cost, it might be that there's a certain kind of student that manages to register for those sections, and other kinds of students are left to take the sections that use TCM, where those materials are a lot more expensive. And students' prior GPA is another strong predictor of their performance in future classes. So if students aren't randomly assigned to a class using OER or a class using TCM, or if there isn't some kind of matching done there, then the study, even though it claims to be asking a question about what's the impact of OER adoption, it might really be asking a question that's more like, how do the kinds of students who manage to get into those low-cost, no-cost sections perform compared to the kinds of students who don't? There might be something systematically different about those kinds of students. Instructor supports is another area. OER research is often conducted in the context of department or institution or system-wide initiatives. And instructors who participate in those initiatives often receive a lot of additional support. They might have access to professional development or support from a librarian, support from an instructional designer. They might get a course release to do a course redesign. They might receive a stipend. There are lots of kinds of supports that are often associated with these OER initiatives. And often the instructors who don't participate in the OER initiative don't get those supports. That's one of the carrots that's used to incentivize faculty to participate in the initiative. Well, instructor supports are another predictor of student success. So if all the instructors in the study that you're looking at didn't receive the same supports, even though the study says it's looking at the difference in outcomes when faculty adopt OER versus when they don't, that study is probably really asking a question that's more like, how do students of faculty who are well supported perform compared to faculty who aren't that well supported? And that's a related but a different question. And finally, instructional design effects. And this is something that often you can't even figure out from the study because there's not even enough information included to give you a sense of what this looks like. Some course materials are more effectively designed than others. And just an example there, OER is often presented as static content like a PDF, whereas interactive courseware often contains a lot of interactions like formative assessment that provides immediate feedback that might even be diagnostic or corrective feedback. And using evidence-based principles in the design of course materials is another strong predictor of student success. So if the OER and the other course materials that they're being compared against have significantly different instructional designs, even though the study says it's a study about the efficacy of OER, the study's probably really asking a question that's more like, how do students taught using course materials that are designed with design X compared to students who are taught using course materials that are designed using design Y? And then, of course, these effects aren't completely independent of each other. You don't have to look very hard to find a study that controls for neither instructor, nor student, nor instructor support, nor instructional design effects. Just confounds all over the place. So adopting OER reliably saves students money. Adopting OER doesn't reliably improve student success. So what does reliably improve student success then? And so I would think of this as being kind of the second secret. You can reliably improve student success when you adopt OER if you also adopt more evidence-based teaching practices and you use more effectively designed OER. It's when you leverage some of these issues that we were talking about here in your favor when you adopt OER. So let me just give you a sense real quickly of what 4 of these evidence-based practices might be, and then concrete examples of how in Lumen courseware we're trying to implement these evidence-based practices. And they can be implemented in other ways, but I'm most familiar with these examples, so they're the ones I'm going to share. The first is fostering a sense of belonging. Students who feel like they belong on campus and in class have higher rates of persistence, of motivation, engagement, and enjoyment. The second is providing opportunities for practice with feedback. There's a great strand of research out of Carnegie Mellon going back several years now that shows that students who engage in practice that has immediate feedback will learn on average about 6 times more per unit time of study than students who spend that time reading text or watching video. A third is leveraging data to support struggling students. Students are more successful when faculty are looking at data, not specifically not going with their intuition, but actually looking at data and adapting their teaching accordingly. And There are also things that we can do to make evidence-based teaching the default. In other words, there are things that, as the designers of courseware, like in Lumen's case, there are things we can do to make it easier for instructors to use evidence-based practices than it is for them to not use them. So let me show you a couple of examples of what I mean here. Lumen offers 3 different kinds of courseware, and Tori will be happy to tell you about all of them and the differences in them. I'm going to pull my examples from Lumen 1, which is this courseware system listed on the far right here. So let's talk about fostering student belonging. This is a quote we heard in a recent round of student interviews that we did, with a student saying, I find it very essential and very crucial in a student's life that there's somebody that really sees you and wants you to succeed. And so in Lumen 1, we try to do that in a couple of different ways. And I'll show you examples of each of these here. The first is what we call the Introduce Yourself assignment. And this is an assignment where students are asked a series of questions, and they share with faculty member things like their preferred name, which might be different from what's in the SIS, the way that name is pronounced, their pronouns, other key information about themselves, like obligations they have outside of class that the instructor might need to know about. And then that's all presented in a dashboard to the instructor, who for every student in the class can see what's their, what do they want to be called in class? Where are they in their program? What's their major? Why did they even sign up for this class? This kind of information is super helpful as an instructor to know and to understand, and can help you interact with students in a way that really helps them to feel seen. We just mentioned this goes by name that students are able to express in that first assignment. And then that shows up everywhere throughout the Lumen courseware. Anywhere that we name a student, we're always going to show you their goes by name, so that when you talk to them, you can be sure to call them by that name that they prefer. And then another thing that we've worked pretty hard on, and done this in collaboration with students, is finding ways that we can give students choices. Anytime there's something that students are asked to do, for example, in the Intro to Statistics course, there's lots of opportunities for them to analyze data. Maybe a particular data set isn't really relevant or interesting to a student. So providing them with the opportunity to choose from multiple data sets and dig into one and analyze one that feels more relevant and more interesting to them is one way that we can support them in that sense. And then just drawing more examples that students tell us, these are the kinds of examples that feel relevant to me, that feel interesting to me, that are engaging to me. Another of these evidence-based practices I mentioned is providing opportunities for practice with a lot of feedback. This is another quote from a student. I like problems. Give me more problems and less stuff to read. I mean, it's nice to have that stuff to read if I need it, but I feel like I learn more by trying it, by doing it, right? So, and it's awesome to have these student quotes that actually line up with the evidence out of research about what makes for most effective instruction. But one thing we do in Lumen 1 is there's lots of embedded practice right in the middle of a page where you might have read a paragraph or two about a topic. Immediately, there's going to be a little try it activity here where you're going to have an opportunity to apply what you just learned, see if you understood it or not. And if not, get some feedback that tells you, no, in this case, remember, you want to apply Bayes' theorem. And if that feedback isn't enough, you can watch a video to walk you through this kind of problem. But not reading through a whole chapter and then getting to the end and finding out that you didn't understand, but really providing these in-the-moment opportunities for students to practice in a way that's not graded. This doesn't impact their final grade in any way. This is literally just practice. At the end of each module, there's a self-check that students can do again so that they can determine for themselves whether they're ready to go on or not. They have unlimited attempts on these self-checks as well. And these self-checks are graded for completion, not for correctness. So we want to encourage students to do them, but they don't need to be getting things right here yet. This isn't the final. This isn't the summative assessment. This is a self-check. This is for them to know if they're understanding or not, and to help them manage their own study time. In Lumen 1, as well as in our other courseware, we use a mastery-based approach where students have multiple attempts on the end, what you'd call the end of chapter kind of quiz. And after their first attempt on that quiz, we give them pretty detailed feedback about information that or topics that they haven't mastered yet and where they should go back and spend more time reviewing before they take their second attempt on a quiz that will be similar. It's generated algorithmically, so they'll see different questions, but they'll be on the same topics. And one student told us, if I'm struggling, that means I didn't get it the first time. So why after the end of my first quiz, why would you just send me back to review the same stuff? That just makes it even more obvious that the problem is me, right? Sending me back to review the material that didn't help me the first time. So another thing we've done is created these sections called fresh takes, which covers the same material, but in a different way. So it gives you a chance to kind of learn it in another way with additional explanations, additional practice videos, and things like that. So these are some ways that we implement this evidence-based practice of providing students with opportunities for practice and feedback. Another is leveraging data to support struggling students that I mentioned. We've heard students say, and this is actually really interesting. So if I can sidebar for just a moment, when we ask students questions about their favorite courses, it becomes clear really quickly that students don't actually have favorite courses, they have favorite instructors. And every time they think about a favorite course, that course is their favorite because that instructor was their favorite. And that's just been interesting to see. But anyway, this student told us that my favorite professor cared a little bit more. She actually wanted me to graduate. She made me think I could graduate. So what kinds of tools can we provide to faculty, to instructors, to help them kind of communicate this sense of caring and additional support to students? One of these is data insights around individual learning outcomes in a course. Now, a Lumen 1 course will have 150, 200 of these outcomes total. There'll be several of them in each week, obviously 10 to 12 of them in a week. And you or I, as a faculty member, before I go into class to teach, I can pull up this dashboard and see for all the work that students have been doing so far this week, which includes all that formative assessment that we talked about. If students have taken their first attempt on the summative assessment, I can see rolled up right here for every topic. These yellow bars show me the students who have tried some of these assessments but haven't achieved mastery yet. And it may be that I can look at this and I can see that there are some topics where many of the students have achieved mastery, and there's some topics where many of the students have not. And that can help me adjust and adapt the way that I use instructional time so that I spend more time focused on the things that more students are struggling with and less time reteaching things that most students really already have. Another thing we do is providing some messaging tools to support you in the outreach that you do to students. And the first one I want to show you is these automated messages down here at the bottom, nice work messages and study tips messages. And these are fully automated. You set them up and you decide whether you want them to go out or not. But once you've configured them and turned them on, everything happens automatically after that. So the study tips will go out to students when they take the quiz and they don't achieve mastery on the quiz, and they haven't really been engaging with the self-checks in the module. The nice work messages go out to students who actually achieve mastery on the quiz. And lots of students have told us that anytime they get an email from their instructor, they just dread it because they only get communications from us when they've done something wrong. And so it's such a breath of fresh air to get a note from a faculty member because that just says, hey, you're doing great, like nice work. Here's an example of what it looks like to set up those study tips. There's a template here that is already pre-written that if you like that, you can just use it, but you can click right into this box and change this language up in any way that you like. And you'll see a preview over here of what that's going to look like. The student's preferred name is going to be dropped in here. The name of the module or of the primary outcome for that week that you've been working on that the student will recognize will show up there. And there's always this really kind of positive, confidence building, affirming language in these messages, right? So here's a study tip, go do some additional study in this way, and then I'm looking forward to seeing a higher score from you on that next attempt. And then these nice work messages, there are several of them. They're each a little different, so students aren't getting kind of the same message over and over again. But it's really just 1 or 2 sentences like, hey, awesome job on that quiz. I'm really proud of you, or fantastic work. Keep it up. And the kinds of replies that come back to you as the faculty member when these messages go out on your behalf are just incredible. Students are so grateful for any kind of recognition of the good work that they're doing. The second kind of messaging that can really help you engage with students in these kind of more customized and personalized ways are what we call the time-sensitive interventions. And these happen within the context of a given week when you're working in a module. You can come and look at this dashboard and you can see here, in this case, Vic, he's doing some of the self-checks. He had a pretty low score on the first quiz. You can see specifically here the exact topics that he's struggling with. And so in just 2 clicks here, I can see Vic and I can say, yes, okay, I need to send an email to Vic, and I can click this button. And then I get a message that's pre-written that says, hey, Vic, I can see you're struggling with these specific topics. Will you please come to office hours? Can we jump on Zoom? Can we get together in some way so that I can just help you over the hump on whatever it is you're confused about on these couple of topics? And, you know, the system says to me, hey, you should really consider sending Vic a message. I click this, I read it over, make sure I'm happy with it, adjust it if I want, click send, and that message has gone out to Vic. And now hopefully he'll come to office hours, or he'll go to lab, or he'll reach out to the TA, or whatever options I've provided him in there. And finally, making evidence-based teaching the default. How can we make it easier to engage in evidence-based practices than to not engage in those evidence-based practices? And one of the ways that we try to do that in Lumen 1, and again, this is just one strategy. There are many ways that you could do this, but one of the ways that we're trying to do it is by integrating active learning exercises directly into course PowerPoints. So if you teach face-to-face and you like to use PowerPoints in your teaching, when you take the Lumen PowerPoints, right out of the box as you're working through them, there will be breaks periodically that have these integrated little active learning activities. They'll say, here's a question, or here's a problem to solve. Let me frame it up for you. Now go ahead and take a minute, turn to the person next to you, discuss your responses with a partner, and then we're going to do some share out and report back. And so, and of course, using active learning in the classroom is a highly effective. This is another evidence-based practice with strong evidence behind it. And so at this point, if you actually wanted to not use active learning in your classroom, you'd have to go through and delete all these slides out of the slide deck. So it's just easier to do the more effective thing in your classroom here, which in this case is using this active learning. So that's one example of a way that we can make more effective teaching the default. So let me wrap it up, and hopefully we'll have time for a couple of questions and some discussion here. Just coming back to this idea of what's the secret to improving student success with OER, the real secret is that you can reliably, consistently improve student success when you adopt OER if you yourself also adopt more evidence-based teaching practices, and if you use more effectively designed OER. If you adopt OER that looks exactly like the textbook that you were using before, and you don't change anything about the way you teach, of course, you're not going to see differences in student outcomes. You're doing the same things, students are doing the same things. When you do the same things, you get the same results. But you can improve student success when you adopt OER if, as part of adopting OER, you also adopt more evidence-based teaching practices, and the OER that you adopt is more effectively designed than the TCM the traditionally copyrighted materials that you were using before. So with that, I'll say thanks, and maybe I'll stop the slide share. And I think we've got a couple of minutes that Tori and I can answer any questions that you have. I haven't been keeping an eye on the chat, I admit.
All good, David. I've been keeping an eye for you. And then I see somebody asking about presentation side. So yep, those will be, there will be something going out to presenters to submit slides. So I'll be collecting those, and those will be made available on the website after the conference wraps up. And I have all of those. So that's when we'll get copies of the presentation slides out to folks. But yep, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to come off mute. or put them in the chat and we can have some questions.
Hey, David. On LinkedIn, I see you talking about Lumen One all the time. And I know this presentation was kind of showing both One and Waymaker and mixing it. But I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that and how that might be a little bit different than Waymaker.
So the idea behind Lumen, well, let me step back. Prior to Lumen One, Lumen had, well, you don't have to mute your video, Ed. Let me see you while I'm talking to you, buddy. Prior to Lumen One, Lumen had two courseware systems, one called Waymaker and one called OHM. And OHM is really focused on kind of quantitatively intensive courses, math courses where there's a lot of calculation to be done. And Waymaker was more focused on the more kind of qualitative courses. Lumen One, the one in Lumen One is pulling together the best parts of both Waymaker and OHM into one system. So actually everything I showed today was from Lumen One. And if some of it looks like Waymaker to you, that's because the best parts of Waymaker have kind of come forward into Lumen One, and part of it looks like OHM because parts of OHM have been drawn into Lumen One as well. So that's why when you see things in one, you think, well, I remember a version of that from Waymaker. Yes, you do, but it's been kind of updated and improved as it's been kind of synthesized or integrated into this new platform.
So would it be fair to say that One then is more flexible in the question engine and sometimes uses the OHM and sometimes uses more kind of traditional, because I see you have like some psychology in there and that's not necessarily a quantitative heavy.
Yeah, and intro to business as well. And so actually what we've done is we've extended the OHM engine so that it can do more of the non-quantitative types of questions, and we only use the OHM assessment engine in Lumen One. So it's delivering both the quantitative and the non-quantitative assessments there. Everything is OHM in Lumen One.
Thanks for getting nerdy with me a little bit. I appreciate that. I like to know.
No, I will nerd out all you want to nerd out. Other questions?
David, I put my contact information in the chat. So if anyone does have questions or you're interested in having further conversations about some of the resources offered through the partnership, please feel free to reach out in email. Ed did bring up Lumen One, so that has been added to the OER catalog now. The courses that are available, we are piloting right now in SUNY. And for anyone who would like a demo, you could either email me directly, or you can go to oer.suny.edu and you can click on one of the courses there and we can set up a demo for you.
Yeah, and just to say it again, all the things I talked about today, all the things that Tori talked about, the 3 different kinds of courseware, the professional development, everything is free for SUNY students, for SUNY faculty. That's part of the partnership. Nobody has another question. Ed's going to ask another. I can see it in his eyes.
All right, I don't see any more questions coming in. Thank you very much, David and Tori. It was a great presentation. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here.